Hello again, and welcome back to my rare series in review series. Today, we'll be discussing Invincible, which just had a very successful Season 4 finale. This review will touch on the comics as well, but only lightly. Before we go further, I want to make clear, I like Invincible, and I think it's a good series. This review is not a takedown or even really a critique. This is more me exploring why someone who might think well of the show may still struggle to get into it based on, well, we'll get into that. But first, I want to thank my wonderful patrons making these episodes possible. Links below. Now, for the uninitiated, Invincible is a comic and animated series that bills itself as a superhero setting with a more grey tone and a greater sense of realism. That is to say, violence is not bloodless, civilians die when aliens invade, and sometimes heroes can't find another way, etc. The story follows the son of one of, if not Earth's strongest superhero, Omni-Man, Nolan, to his friends, an alien from another world who married the human named Debbie, leading to the young hybrid who gained his powers in his late teens, thus letting him finally become a superhero and finding it is a much more grisly and difficult process than he imagined. More integrally, this led to the big twist with Nolan actually being a long-term sleeper agent on Earth to determine if hybrids would be a viable way to continue his nearly extinct species for the Viltrumite Empire. He assassinated the Guardians of the Globe and eventually crashed out over his still developing morals and love of Earth versus his upbringing, worsened by Mark's refusal to go along with his plans. After Nolan leaves at the end of Season 1, we continue to follow Mark as he tries to step up as nominally the strongest being on the planet to defend it. Throughout the second and third seasons, we see him face multiversal haters, universal duplicates, and other Viltrumites, various invasions, dragons, and more with varying levels of success and a lot of trauma. Also, he and his mother welcome Nolan's second son, Oliver, who is half insect, to the family. Before hitting Season 4, when Nolan is back from his space adventure and self-discovery/redemption arc with Alan the Alien to get him to join the coalition of planets to finally defeat the Viltrumite Empire. This doesn't go great, but they did destroy the planet and the surviving Viltrumites are now in hiding on Earth with the threat of killing billions and enslaving the survivors, quelling Mark's willingness to try and boot them off planet. They intend to repopulate and then return to their empire, but with stuff like the new and improved Scourge virus hanging overhead and the prospect of Viltrumites not living in a fascist super hierarchy for months if not years, who knows what will happen? Well, having read some of the comics, I have some idea, but we'll get into that. So, before we continue, I do want to commend the series for some of its accomplishments. These range from some genuinely spectacular fights, to fascinating world building, some extremely cool characters, and a very strong character-centric throughline in regards to plot, plus a genuinely solid but very flawed Secret Service superhero handler in Cecil. I'd also argue the TV adaptation made some solid adaptational choices, such as expanding on Debbie's character, making Thrag deeper but no less malevolent, and expanding on some other things like Nolan and Alan's journey, Shrinking Ray, and more. There's some changes I'd like if they had done more on, see Season 1 Immortal versus later, and I confess much of the romantic stuff for Mark has just never grabbed me. And while I think the series has done a fantastic job exploring the interpersonal trauma of living in a superhero world, the infrastructure seems to recover a bit too quickly to me. I mean, if nothing else, you'd expect constant flaks and invasions would reduce the property values. Still, I respect its ambition in trying to tackle these themes, and I'd say it succeeds often. But the stumbles alone wouldn't be enough to keep me at only simmering interest, yet that is where I am, which I found to be very odd. That is to say, I like the show, I think it has many good qualities, and yet it has never dragged me into the depths of fandom like others have. Why? Answering that question is what brought about this review, and it comes down to 3 major points. 1. While I think they've done some good stuff with Thrag, I still find the Viltrumites to be one of the least interesting parts of the setting. Some of it is their powers, I just don't find flying bricks that enjoyable, and their emphasis in their narrative adds to that. Slight comic spoilers here, but I am also a little iffy on the direction taken with them in the comics. I don't disagree with the theme of de-radicalizing them being a good thing, but the path there feels a bit too easy given their own society failed at this, and given just how hard it was for Nolan. 2. Mark is a fine main character who is being put through a veritable psychological blender. I like the guy and feel for him. However, his prominence not just in the narrative as the main character of the story, but again, slight comic spoilers here, but being the future Emperor, the strongest Viltrumite, and basically the actual main character of the entire universe, it's kind of so much narrative baggage that it takes me out of the story. I enjoyed Mark more when it didn't feel like the universe orbited him. 3, and finally, in large part thanks to the 2 above factors, I will make the argument that while Invincible bills itself as a superhero series, it's really more of a space opera, one blended with a sort of messianic storyline given where Mark ends up, albeit one with deconstructive elements given some of his choices, but more spoilers lie there. Ultimately, the issue is I find the superhero stuff far more enjoyable than the other elements, which means I am constantly being taken out of the story by its main character and plot. Note, some have suggested I indulge in the other Invincible-verse stories, but they kind of run into issues I find, where either the works are so disconnected from the world that they are functionally different settings entirely, see Savage Dragon or Spawn. Or, like Tech Jacket and Fire Breather, their stories may stand alone, but their world's orbit marks, even if indirectly, and their conclusion will be rather tragic given the future timeline we saw. And some, like the Brit, have kind of hit the same issue I have with Invincible, just in a different font, while also sharing the Tech Jacket issue of having a mostly doomed timeline. Which again isn't to say the show is bad, just that the stuff I like most about it is not the main narrative focal point, and the elements I find less interesting are, which means I struggle to stay invested despite it being good enough to snare my attention. It just can't keep it. Which is a shame, but hey, it's not exactly wanting for fans, and the elements I struggle with are many people's favourite parts of the story. I just wanted to explore why someone might struggle to connect with a story they consider genuinely good and even enjoyable at times, and I hope I've done that. Thanks for tuning in.